Okay, starting Shakespeare today. Hopefully you read the study of Shakespeare, background of Shakespeare, I can't remember what it's called in here. A study of William Shakespeare, which gives the background to Shakespeare's theater and a little bit of biography. I'm just going to go over some of this quickly. For all intents and purposes, we say Shakespeare was born on April 23rd. We don't have his exact birthday. I think we have a baptismal certificate, which is what indicates probably that he's born on the 23rd. He dies on April 23rd, 1616. So he died, he dies on his '52nd birthday, right? Marries Anne Hathaway in 1582. I want to say this is in November of 1582. His first child, Susanna, is born in May of 1583. So it's a shotgun wedding, okay? It's only 6 months. They're not married in Stratford. They're married in, I think, a county, 2 counties over, probably because she was pregnant. Shakespeare's only 18. She was 26, okay, when they were married. They have twins born in 1585. Their names are Hamnet and Judith. Hamnet dies in 1600, 1601, something like that. Pretty young, 15 or so. From 1585 to 1592, we have no idea what Shakespeare was doing. We have no idea where he lived. I need to bring up something very quickly. There are theories as to what he was doing. The earliest of these theories was first proposed in the mid 17th century, if I remember correctly, 1640s or so. Some of the things that it was suggested that he did was that he was a school teacher. He served as a secretary to some kind of important guys. All a secretary did at that point was kind of handle correspondence, write letters, things like that. That he traveled the continent, and that he was a roaming actor, okay? Or just some of the ideas. There's no evidence for any one of them. All we know is, last time we have what's called documentary evidence, that is something written about him, is 1585, when his twins are born. And then in 1592, he's referred to by this guy named Thomas Green, who writes this pamphlet. He's dying, he's literally on his deathbed. And he writes this thing called A Groat's Worth of Wit and 1,000 of Remembrance. A groat is like a penny, all right? And Green lambasts this, as he puts it, upstart crow, okay? It's a phrase that he uses, an upstart crow who feathers his something or other, refers to him as a shake scene in a country, and he directly quotes from part of one of Shakespeare's Henry VI plays in reference to him, okay? So we know that therefore by 1592, Shakespeare has already made a name for himself in London. It's thought that his earliest play, probably dates from around 1589 to 90, and his last full play, written by him, 1612. He writes 37 plays by himself, all right, for full-length plays. He assists on 2 others. In addition to that, he writes 4 very long poems, several hundred lines each, very long poems, and 154 sonnets. We're going to be reading, I think, around 3 of these sonnets. And he does all that within roughly this 22-year period. So that's about 1.5 plays a year. And again, these aren't like, if you read the the introduction to the drama section, and you read either Trifles or The Story of an Hour, these little one-act plays that take 30 minutes to produce or 20 minutes to produce. Just about every one of Shakespeare's plays, even the shortest one, is about 3 hours. Hamlet's the longest, takes over 4 hours if you don't cut anything. Okay? Most filmmakers, when they do a film of Hamlet, they cut. Sometimes they cut quite a bit. Okay? So, the kinds of plays Shakespeare writes, you've got comedies, histories. Primarily, these are what you have. Comedies, histories, and tragedies. And there's another one, give it a bit more space, romances, okay? But these are the three main ones. We haven't talked about comedy much, because the two plays by Sophocles that we did are tragedies. With comedies, if you remember when we talked about tragedies, we did this pyramid. So you have the conflict and the exposition on this side with what's called the rising action. Okay. At the top here, you have the climax, where you get the reversal, the recognition, all that kind of stuff, where the tragic hero comes to a realization of what he did. And then on this side, you have the falling action and the resolution. For a comedy, you just flip that. Okay? Comedy begins the same way often as a tragedy. That is, you begin with some problem in society. Somehow society, the fabric of society gets torn, it gets ripped apart. Okay? Society there not necessarily meaning the entire country or state, but it can be the smallest unit of society, a family. Okay? So you get some kind of tear or rupture, that's the conflict. And then you have this falling action at the beginning, where society is starting to be pulled apart, right? At the climax, however, rather than what occurs in a tragedy, where the tragic hero realizes I've screwed up, and you get the reversal of fortune and the tragic hero falls, here, the rupture or the tear in the fabric of society starts to get repaired. So that when you get to the conclusion, okay, and on this side then you have rising action, where rather than the unraveling, everything is getting put back together. At the conclusion of a comedy, you have society restored, okay? So, give you a real quick example of what that means with Midsummer Night's Dream. Midsummer Night's Dream begins with a couple who are going to get married. Duke Theseus, Duke of Athens, and his fiancée, Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. I'm on page 1173, the introduction, on page 1173 in your textbook. We're going to go pretty quickly to the play itself. Okay? So we find out when the play opens, they're getting married in 4 days. And then another man comes in with his daughter. This guy's name is Aegeus. The daughter's name is Hermia. And he tells Duke Theseus, I want my daughter to marry this man, he has this man come forward, named Demetrius. The daughter doesn't want to marry Demetrius. She wants to marry another man named Lysander. There's the problem. That's the conflict. Okay? She wants to marry Lysander. Her father wants her to marry Demetrius. Okay? That's where society starts to fall apart. Because within 200 lines of the opening of that play, we're told that by the time Theseus and Hippolyta get married in 4 days. The young woman, Hermia, has to decide whether she is going to marry Demetrius. These are the options Theseus gives her. Marry Demetrius, a man she does not love. Become a nun, not a Christian nun, but essentially a follower of the goddess Diana, the goddess of chastity and virtue, sexual virtue and stuff, or die. That's it. There's not an option for her to marry the man she loves. There's not an option for romantic love. Okay? You can see how that could cause everything to fall apart, because that decision will be made the same day the Duke and Hippolyta are getting married. Okay? So what Shakespeare does with the rest of the play is he follows that conflict, how it tears things apart, because it becomes much, much more than just Hermia and who she's going to marry. Okay? Which we'll see pretty quickly. I'm going to stop with that background stuff there. Read the 4 or 5 pages on Shakespeare's theater, what's called the study of Shakespeare in your book. I'm going to add more background material when we get to Hamlet, stuff about the Protestant Reformation and some of the theological and political issues going on during Shakespeare's day, because they figure more in that play than they do in this one. 1 or 2 other things. In 1599, the theater that Shakespeare and his fellow actors, they are part of what's called they're not part of, the Lord Chamberlain's men. The Lord Chamberlain was a very powerful person in connection to Queen Elizabeth, all right? He's like the second most powerful person in the country. The Lord Chamberlain's men was the name of the acting company that Shakespeare was part of. They were named that because he patronized them. He footed their bills, right? They acted out of a theater simply called the Theater. That was built in 1575, I believe it was. Might have been 1576. I'm going to put 1575, 76, okay? It was built on leased land. So the guy who built this, who was the father of one of Shakespeare's fellow actors, I always get the two mixed up, James Burbage, I think. He built this building, named it just the theater, for play acting to be done in. He built it on land that he leased. Okay? In 1599, the lease came due. So he had 2 choices. He could renew the lease, keep paying to rent the land, or he could not renew the lease, in which case the building that he constructed on the land then becomes the property of the landowner. So, what the Lord Chamberlain's men, Shakespeare's acting company, did is they had the building dismantled and moved about 3 miles south on the south bank of the River Thames in an area of London called Southwark. They put it there because it was outside the legal authority of the mayor of London. See, in the mid-1590s, the mayor of London closed down all the playhouses in London because plague. You get people, cram them in a tight spot, it's a very easy way to spread plague. So they closed all the playhouses. So playhouses started when they began reopening. They began reopening down on the south side of the Thames, outside London authority. When they did that, when they rebuilt the theater on the south side of the Thames, they renamed it the Globe. And we've got drawings of London from early, like 1600, 1601, 1610, that show the Globe and 2 or 3 other playhouses. If you go to London today and you visit Shakespeare's Globe Theater, it is about a 1/4 mile west of the original Shakespeare's globe, but it was built using all the same materials. It was built according to, for the most part, the same specs, the same design, the same size. The only two major things have been changed. The size of the seats, and the seats are just bench, they're just wooden benches. The size of those, because we're larger than the average Renaissance person was, I would be considered tall if I went back to 1600 England. I'm 5'10", okay? Average height for a man then was like 5'6", 5'7", all right? And they were a lot skinnier than we are today. So we made it a little larger, easier for larger people to sit in. And two, the thatched roof has a layer of fireproofing in it, because the globe burned down in 1612 during a production of Henry VIII. They fired a cannon, fired a blank, the wadding came out, was on fire, burned the globe down like within an hour, okay? And then there was no globe from then until the late 1990s when an American filmmaker started rebuilding it. Okay, let's turn to the play itself. Beginning on 1181. 1181. Couple things about A Midsummer Night's Dream before we start getting into Act 1. This is probably the most popular romantic comedy Shakespeare wrote. You can't go to London during the summer and not find a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream every night. It's just going on all the time. And that's because it's got some hilarious characters. It's got some, what's the phrase I want? Hilarious juxtapositions of characters, people who don't seem to match, etc. And it's got also some pretty deep ideas, okay? Now, you've got a picture of kind of a cross-section view of the globe in the study of Shakespeare. So there's the stage. Back here. So the globe is as Shakespeare refers to it, it's a wooden O, right? On the outer side, you've got the gallery. This is where the seats are. 3 levels. There were 3 levels in Shakespeare's day, okay? Here is what's called the yard. This is where the groundlings stood. Groundlings were people who paid a penny for admittance, okay? If you go to the Globe today and you get a groundling ticket, it's gone up quite a bit. I think it's now about 10 pounds, which would be about $13, $14. And you buy a groundling ticket and you stand in here, you have to stand. If you try to sit down, one of the volunteers who works will come over and ask you to stand up. If it starts raining and you pop open an umbrella, they'll take it from you. They'll sell you a plastic thing to put on, but you can't sit, you can't put a hat or anything like that on. Stage is right here. At the back of the stage is what's called the tiring house. Remember, on a Greek theater, this was called the skene, or S-K-E-N-E. This is where actors come in and out, and where they change costumes, things like that. The stage, if you're looking at it from the side, would look like this, and it's got a big column, 2 big columns, and then it's got a roof, and then the tiring house is back here. So it's got a column, looking at it from the front, a column here, and a part that goes over like that. So, not quite. It's more like that. It's not quite half of the stage is covered by this part. They have the roof so that you can have the gods come down, like the Deus Ex Machina with Greek tragedies, or so that you can have other things happen from up there. There's a trapdoor down here so that people can go up, people can go down to hell, things like that, okay? So, Okay, page 1181. We get our list of characters, or the dramatis personae. Theseus, Duke of Athens. Theseus is an ancient mythological character. In ancient Greek myth, there is this beast called a minotaur, half man, half ox. Theseus was the one who killed it. Okay, he had to go through a labyrinth, kill him, trace the thread to go back out and such. He also did a lot of other heroic kind of martial warrior-like deeds. Okay, Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. What do you know about Amazons? They're warrior women. Okay, they're an all-woman tribe. They only have men for propagation, that is, to have sex with, to keep Amazons going. If a male child is born, the child is usually simply raised as a slave. If a girl child is born, female child is born, that child is raised and trained up to be a warrior. Here's how serious, according to myth and such, Amazons were, okay? They were archers, bows and arrows. If they were right-handed, so hold the bow like this, pull the string back. If they were right-handed, they cut off their left breast so that when they let go of that string, it wouldn't catch them. If they were left-handed, they cut off the right breast. You got to be pretty, serious in order to maim yourself so that you can fight, right? So this is pretty serious how warrior-like they are. So she's the queen of that tribe, which tells us she's also going to be a warrior. Okay? Then we get Philostrate, or Philostrate, however you want to pronounce his name. He's the master of the rebels. Aegeus' father, Hermia. Then we get 4 names. Okay? These are the 4, frequently they're just called the 4 lovers. All right? Though Theseus and Hippolyta are lovers too. Hermia, daughter of Aegeus, in love with Lysander. Lysander in love with Hermia. Demetrius in love with Hermia and favored by Aegeus. And Helena in love with Demetrius. So, way up here. Hermia, Lysander, Demetrius, Helena. So, Hermia loves Lysander. Lysander loves Hermia. Demetrius loves Hermia. Helena loves Demetrius. You can see the problem right there. Okay? And then we get, to complicate things even more, Oberon, king of the fairies, and Titania, queen of the fairies. See, I didn't want to have to get into this, but I'm going to have to get into this. Part of the belief system in Shakespeare's day was that everything that is created, everything that exists in a hierarchy. Everything's connected, in other words, like a chain, okay? Great chain of being. So, at the top of that chain is not God, because God's not created. God's outside all that, above all that. So, the highest part of that great chain of being is the angelic realm. And even within the angelic realm, you've got orders. The highest of the angels are the cherubim and seraphim. Depending on who you're reading, they go back and forth. Down to your lowest, everyday, common, ordinary angel. And all angel means is messenger. That's all it is. Okay? Beneath the angels, then, for the most part, you have humans. And there's a hierarchy there, right? Maybe not in the United States, so we say, but in England, you had a queen, and then you have various levels of royalty, all the way down to at the lowest level of society, the person tied to the land, okay? Animals, what's the king of the beasts? The lion, so supposedly. What's king of the beasts of the air? The eagle. King of the beasts of the ocean, blue whale, something like that. Okay, plants, giant redwood, biggest tree in the world, etc., all the way down to the lowest particle of creation, okay? All of this stuff exists on a chain. So, if there's a problem, if you yank a link out of that chain, everything beneath it goes all wobbly. We just mentioned Oberon and Titania. Where are the fairies in this thing? They are here. They're a little bit above us, but they're not angels. Okay? So they're higher than we are on this great chain of being. So if something happens in their link, it's going to affect everything down below. And we're going to find out in Act 2, something has happened in their link. And that is what is causing, or has a corresponding effect on everything down beneath. Okay? So, you have Oberon, king of the fairies, Titania, his queen. And then you have Puck, who's a trickster. Think Loki in the Norse mythology. Okay? And then a bunch of other fairies whom we're not going to pay any attention to. So, top of the next page, you have a bunch of other characters who are, well, they're not introduced that way, okay? Who are often called the rustics, clowns, or rude, I have no idea why they're called this, rude mechanicals, okay? Of those three terms, the one I dislike the most is clowns. They're not clowns. We have a notion of what a clown is, right? It's a guy who wears the big red funny shoes and has the red ball in the nose and the weird hair. They're not that. These guys are all tradesmen. They're skilled craftsmen, okay? Peter Quince, a carpenter. Nick Bottom, a weaver. Francis Flute, a bellows mender. Tom Snout, a tinker. Snug, a joiner. That's a kind of carpenter, someone who works with wood, makes bookcases and beds and window frames and all that kind of stuff. Robin Starveling, a tailor, and then various others, okay? These characters, I'm just going to call them the rustics. These characters in Act 5 are going to put on a play within the play. Shakespeare loves doing this. He does it in several of his comedies, right? So, thinking of that hierarchy, notice the dramatis personae begins with the Duke and Queen, highest levels. And they get down to the rude mechanicals, the rustics at the end. So, two other things. Remember talking about Sophocles, that Sophocles follows what Aristotle terms the three unities. Unity of time, place, and action. All of the play occurs within a single 24-hour period. All of the play occurs at one location, there on the stage in front of the palace, and all of the play has one plot, one major conflict. None of that is appropriate by the time we get to Shakespeare. It all gets thrown out the window, okay? Shakespeare, for example, in Midsummer Night's Dream, you have two settings. Athens, whether it is the court of Theseus or Athens kind of writ large, and a wood outside Athens. And Shakespeare uses settings almost like characters, okay? Athens stands for reason, order, civilization, law. The wood stands for the opposite of all of those. Unrationality, disorder, chaos, anarchy. All right? So you wouldn't expect stuff that happens in the wood to happen in Athens. So for example, the play's going to open and we're going to find out, as I said a few moments ago, that Aegeus wants his daughter to marry this one guy. She doesn't want to marry him. She wants to marry somebody else. She wants to marry Lysander. We're going to hear pretty soon, Lysander is going to tell Hermia, let's go off to the woods and get married there. Why? Athenian law doesn't reach there. We can do what we want there. So a lot of stuff is going to happen in the play, in the woods, between the opening scene, okay, and the final scenes. Act 4, Scene 2 to the end of the play, and Act 1, all of Act 1, I believe. Okay? So, we open, page 1182, and we're at Theseus's court. Theseus says, now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon, but oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. Okay? So, we have 4 days until our wedding. But he says, those 4 days are going to what? They're going to take a long time. That's why he calls the moon slow. What is he telling us? He's excited. He wants to get married. He wants it to be now. But we have to wait. Okay? She lingers my desires like to a stepdame or a dowager, etc., etc. Hippolyta, 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream. First use of the word. We're going to hear the word dream used multiple times in the play, and it's going to be tied to, or it will be synonymous to, visions, fantasies, imaginations, things like that. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time, and then the moon, like to a silver bow now bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities. So he's talking about the night, and then she says 4 days, days and nights, complete 24-hour periods. And she says those days will quickly steep themselves in night. What kind of verb is steep? Anybody know? It's only used in one instance, really, anymore. It's tea. When you make tea. Not steep as in like an angle. Okay? When you make tea, you steep it in hot water. And what happens? That water, which is clear, does what? Gets dark because of the qualities of the tea coming out. So she says these 4 days, indicating lightness, will quickly steep. They'll become darkened in night. Okay? And the nights will do what? Dream away the time. The nights will make it seem like no time has passed. Or like there's not been a delay. So, Theseus tells the master of the revels, go stir up the Athenian youth. Why? We want to have a party the night we get married. Jugglers, whatever. Okay? And then he says, line 16, Hippolyta, I wooed thee with my sword. And you've got a gloss down there. In a military engagement against the Amazons when Hippolyta was taken captive. So, when he says, I wooed thee with my sword, I courted thee. We don't use wooed or court language anymore today. I won your heart. How? He defeated her in battle. So, is this a forced marriage? I wooed thee with my sword and won thy love, doing thee injuries. Now, maybe he's just talking about, I wounded her pride. Because the Amazonians were very proudful women. They took pride in their defeat of men. And here he defeated her. And won thy love doing thee injuries, but I will wed thee in another key with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling. That is, it's not going to be something where she's going to be up there at the, so to speak, altar with a sword to her back. He says, no, we're going to have a proper wedding. Okay? Aegeus comes in. And Aegeus says, what's up? What's the news? Full of vexation come I with complaint against my child, my daughter Hermia. So he says, Hermia? And she comes to stand forth. And then he tells Demetrius to come forth. He says, here's my daughter Hermia. Here's Demetrius. He has my consent to marry her. So, I've told Demetrius he can marry my daughter. But this man, and he calls Lysander, this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. What does it mean to bewitch? You put a spell on her. He doesn't mean it literally. What does he mean? He's done something that caused her to fall in love with him. Okay? What's he done? He's given her rhymes. He's interchanged love tokens, whatever those love tokens are. He's sung at her window and such. Okay? And he has stolen the impression of her fantasy. And you've got a gloss down there. He made her fall in love with you, Lysander, imprinting your, Lysander's, image on her imagination. That is, he's done things that made it so that all Hermia sees, metaphorically, is Lysander. All she wants is Lysander. Okay? And with cunning hast thou filched, line 36, my daughter's heart. He's turned her obedience, which is due to me, to stubborn harshness. Why is her obedience due to him? Okay, this is ancient Greece. This is like Oedipus, ancient Greece. What kind of rights and such do women have? None. She has to do what her father tells her to do. So he says, if she won't marry Demetrius, I beg the ancient privilege of Athens, line 41. As she is mine, I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death. Either she marries Demetrius or she dies. This is her father speaking. So Theseus, notice Theseus doesn't say, come on, Aegeus, that's a little extreme. It's the Athenian law. So Theseus says to Hermia, what do you say, Hermia? Be advised. Your father should be like a god to you. How so? One that composed your beauties, and one to whom you are but as a form in wax by him imprinted. And this has to do with Elizabethan ideas of patrimony and parentage and such, that the father imprints on the mother the image of the child. And when the child is born, I mean, what is one of the, what can somebody today use as a reason to demand a paternity test? If a child looks like this man as opposed to this man. If a woman has a child and the child is a dead ringer for this guy, but not for the supposed father, that could be reason to get a DNA test. Okay? So, he says it's within his power to make this demand. Demetrius is a worthy gentleman. Come on, what's wrong with Demetrius? She says so is Lysander. That is, Lysander is also worthy. You're right. Notice, Duke Theseus doesn't say she's wrong. He says, in himself, he is. You're right. Lysander is worthy. But he lacks one thing, your father's voice. Your father hasn't said, I give you consent to marry him. Therefore, Demetrius must be held the worthier. And Hermia throws out Shakespeare's first kind of little joke in the play. I would my father had looked but with my eyes. What does she mean? I wish my father looked at Lysander the way I do. But how does she look at Lysander? Future husband. See, that probably gets some people in the audience snickering, chuckling. Is that some kind of gay allusion or suggestion? Some have taken it that way. And let me make a comment about this and where people stood and or sat. Okay? I mentioned these people, what were called the groundlings, paid a penny to stand in the yard. That's because they couldn't afford a seat. These are the people like these guys. They work with their hands. Bartenders, shop cleaners, dishwashers, etc. Okay? So everybody in here standing probably does not have what's called a formal education. They probably did not go to grammar school. Okay? Definitely did not go to university. These people are the ones who are educated. They have gone to a grammar school, and a 6th grade grammar school in Shakespeare's day would be like a college education today. Okay? One of Shakespeare's contemporaries said about him in an epitaph, a poem he wrote after Shakespeare died, said Shakespeare had little Latin and less Greek. And that was taken by some people to mean Shakespeare never attended a university. And that was taken by this group, talk about for a moment, to mean the William Shakespeare who came from Stratford-upon-Avon in Warwickshire, England, could not have written the plays. It's a group called the Anti-Stratfordians. They're against the William Shakespeare Stratford being the author of the plays. Because that Shakespeare, we're almost positive, like 99% sure, never attended a university. But he probably did, like 99% positive, attend the local grammar school that went through what we would call like about 6th grade. Would have started around the age of 6, maybe 5, and gone through about the age of 12. And somebody who went through that kind of education would have gotten as much Latin and Greek from the ages of 6 to 12 as if you went to the University of the South, Sewanee, today, and got a classics degree, Greek and Latin, in 4 years. So when Ben Jonson said, I think we've got this poem later in the semester. When Ben Jonson said Shakespeare had little Latin and less Greek, he's talking about compared to him, Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson everybody said, was the master of Latin and Greek of his day, okay? So, when he says, when she makes that comment, I would my father look but with my eyes, she's appealing probably to the group of people here who would take that as being an off-color / dirty joke. I wish my father wanted to sleep with Lysander like I did. Okay? And that's why Theseus says, rather your eyes must with his judgment look. You have to be able to see, you have to look at Lysander the way your father does. That is, without favor. So she says, your grace, I know not by what power I am made bold. What she means is, I don't know why I feel like I have the right to ask you this. But she's going to ask him a question. What's the worst that can happen to me if I don't agree to marry Demetrius? What's going to happen? Notice, Theseus is put on the spot. Okay? How did this begin? How did it open? Theseus and Apollo to come out. I've seen productions where they come out holding hands. I've seen productions where they come out just walking to each other, and they're talking about the big marriage in 4 days. They're both looking forward to it, supposedly. And now Theseus, same scene, still thinking of his marriage, has got to say, either to die the death or to abjure forever the society of men. If you don't marry Demetrius, you will either die or you will forever have to say goodbye to men. All right? Therefore, question your desires. Know of your youth, examine well your blood. What's he mean? You are a young woman with hormones. Can you give up? Can you never have sex the rest of your life? the desires and blood. Whether if you yield not to your father's choice, you can endure the livery, the dress, the clothes of a nun, I to be in shady cloister mewed. Cloisters are places where nuns or monks, would walk for hours saying their prayers, but they were cloistered, they were shut up in a building and didn't have commerce, conversations, etc. with people outside the monasteries or convents. To live a barren sister all your life, chanting faint hymns to the cold, fruitless moon. Thrice blessed they that master sow their blood to undergo such maiden pilgrimage. In other words, and those who can do that, they're more blessed than those who have to get married because they want to have sex. Again, you got to put yourself in the mindset. You got to take the 21st century mindsets we all have, throw it out the window, and go back to, if not ancient Greece's mindset, at the very least Shakespeare's period's mindset, which was sex outside marriage is wrong, even though, where were they? Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway had sex long before they got married. We know because their first child was born at 6 months. Go on. So he says, but earthlier happy is the rose distilled than that which withering on the virgin thorn grows, lives, and dies in single blessedness. But, he says, you will be earthlier happy. Earthlier meaning tied to the earth and giving into your bodily desires. Okay? If you can marry, notice it's not saying who. So she says, so will I grow, so live, so die my Lord. That is, I will die withering on the virgin thorn and die in single blessedness. I will die never having known a man sexually and never having children before I yield my virgin patent up, my virginity, to him, to Demetrius. Notice, to his lordship, whose unwished yoke my soul consents not to give sovereignty. I'm not going to give up my body to him. He said, no, don't tell me now. And this is where I think Theseus kind of puts a noose around his head. He says, tell you what, take time to pause. And between now and the next new moon, and what is the next new moon? The sealing day betwixt my love and me. So between now and our marriage day, decide. So he's just told us, the day we're going to get married, the day we're going to have this great blessing, that's the day you have to decide. Are you going to marry a man you don't love and essentially give licensed rape to him? Or are you going to become nun to the goddess of chastity and virginity? Or are you going to die? Any one of those three would put what kind of, emotion for the wedding day? It'd be like Parson Hooper showing up for that wedding, dressed all in black, after the funeral and okay. So he's gonna tell us then, Demetrius, relent, sweet Hermia, and Lysander, yield thy crazy title to my certain right. Why is it his right? Because her father said. Lysander, you have her father's love, Demetrius. Let me have Hermia's. Again, appealing to the groundlings. What has he just said? Her father loves you. Go marry him. And the groundlings are going, you get that? He's talking about buggering, to use a British term. Homosexual sex. Let me have Hermia. Scornful Lysander. Notice, Lysander knows exactly what, Aegeus knows exactly what Lysander just intimated. All right? True, he hath my love, and what is mine, I can give away. So he says, I give her to Demetrius. Again, ancient Greek society, if you remember from Oedipus and Antigone, women have no rights. Women have no choice. Women have no power, nothing. Okay? We'll go ahead and stop there, and we'll pick up with about that same line. We're going to be about one day behind unless I can get us caught up. So we'll pick up around 95 or so on Wednesday. All right.